They are attempting to block me. Yes. I think it's open for everybody. There's a back and forth about that. But I don't want to comment too much about that. Let me say, if for any reason we are not on the ballot, let me be very clear. I have been clear on my public stages, and I'll be clear here today. This 10 trillion heist is what I would like to liken as a virus. Coronavirus. It started in 2014. 2014. Jubilee was then called Uhuruto. Uhuruto became Jubilee in 2017. Corona became COVID-19. From COVID-19, we heard of two strands. One was called Omicron, the other was called Delta. Omicron and Delta. What we are faced with today as so-called choices are Omicron and Delta. Azimio, Kenya Kwanza. It's the same virus. If anybody believes that virus is going to cure anything, it's up to you. I call it a virus, and I say it must be exterminated. We must vaccinate against it and remove it from our midst. And this is the beginning. This is the beginning. Any other question? Kennedy, are you happy with that?
This is Edwin Austin from KBC.
Where's David?
Edwin Austin.
Edwin, where are you? Oh, Edwin. Yeah, I can see you now.
I have two questions for you.
Yes, Edwin.
From what you presented, one word spells across the whole statistics, and that word is corruption. My question to you is this: do you have a silver bullet for corruption? And secondly, if all does not go to plan, the second question is this: if all does not go to plan and you do not find yourself on the ticket come the August 9th, will you be open to serving the administration of the next president, regardless of who they are? Thank you.
Thank you, Edwin. Let me answer your first question. I think corruption is an understatement of what I have shown here. This is a heist. It's grand theft. Corruption is too small a word. This is of international proportions. And I believe what I've articulated here probably is something that is in very many places in our African continent. This is happening and being replicated in very many developing countries. So we are opening up Pandora's box. My pancreas for this so-called grand theft are what we are doing today, because our constitution covers everything. It is accountability. Being public and people understanding the economy and holding officials to account is the greatest thing. So one of the silver bullets of our manifesto was that we are going to make sure that everything is available on public platforms through IT. And all interactions with government are electronic. So a policeman cannot give you a ticket, huku nje. Yeah? There is a process electronically through IT. Because IT, like the published websites of CBK and the published Appropriations Act on the platforms of Ministry of Finance, is where we got all this source material. So IT is the way to go. It's the better scrutiny for accounting our public money and the processes, interrogating the processes. So we seek to do a lot of civic education on Kenyans to understand their counties, their constituencies, their wards, money, and how bribery, even of them, is a plague they are giving generations to come. And we are better than that. We Kenyans, we Africans are better than that. We must start holding each other to a higher moral standard. We are. We are. It is in our culture, it is in our ways. These shortcuts normally come because you have a percolation from the top. The top percolates a methodology, an ethic, a culture. If the top stopped, everything else stops. In the previous regime, you never heard of such grand theft. Never. Because it could not be attributed to the top echelons of power. So we must start holding, and the Constitution showed you here, the presidential warrants. Hold the president accountable. I'm not being personal, but he is holding 2 books. He signs warrants for 2 books. One he has signed, called Development Appropriation. And he has signed in Development Appropriation 2 trillion. Then in Recurrent Appropriations Act, at the same time, he signed repayments of those loans to 5.6. How does he do that? More than he has signed for us taking loans. He is accountable. And that is the constitution of this country. It's not personal. These are the instruments. So all I need to do, and people need to do, is be educated like I'm trying to do today. When you know this, it holds a president accountable to an officer in every single ministry. Information sets you free. Information brings accountability. Okay? Now, you asked me a second question. I don't know. I believe I'm a vaccine. How do I go and join a virus? I don't see it. I don't see it. You have to convince me, but I don't see it. Yes? You know, there are those who say that when you don't vote, when you create a gap, others are able to rig. It's actually untrue. I remember we were part of the boycott of the second election in 2017. We campaigned for it. And the lack of voters created an illegitimacy of the Jubilee regime. That illegitimacy is what led to handshake, because it was illegitimate at the ballot of October 26th. Show your protest. Even non-participation in an election is a voice. I think I've answered you, Ikram. Let me just make a comment on something you said about 52% of revenue going to government wages. The same government said 65% is going to debt in this budget year. So if you count that 52 plus 65, means on their recurrent appropriations, they overspent on wages and debt repayment of 17%. That's 117 if you add them. Now, so 117, where did they get it from? So these are the things we're asking. Because you have no approval to borrow that 117, so what are these figures? So this is the question we keep asking, that don't trust too much what you are seeing. If you interrogate them, you get very big question marks. Now, what we are beginning today is a part of bringing wananchi closer to the conversation, because of my profile, closer to the conversation of interrogation of everything a government does. We will not shy away. And if we are prepared to say that there's been a heist of 10 trillion, 9.7 trillion has been a heist, I think you understand I'm making a very big statement here. And that we are not going to pay any debt. And anybody who thinks they believes we owe them, let them come and show us what project they funded, and we'll ask them to show us where it is in our appropriations which have been passed by the budgets over the last 8 years. And if it is not there, it is not Wanjiko's concern. That is the law and the Constitution. If we remove the debt burden, as I'm saying, and put in the credit, you are changing the conversation for Kenyans completely. Because you're saying with our revenue, and especially with the credit, which will be a huge stimulus of 1.2 trillion, every Kenyan here has capacity now to grow. These banks who are loaning government will be looking for all of us to start a business, to do something. The government now can actually focus on government projects that are going to be a stimulus to each and every one of our lives. And we will hold them to account because we have more and more knowledge. We are trying to simplify these big things that they talk about in Parliament. They are not big things. It's like our own household. A budget is like how you also manage your own household affairs. If you want to extend the house kidogo, if you want to build a bigger pen for the cuckoo, that is called development. If you are paying for food on the table, that is called recurrent. You see, these are simple things in our homes. So we want to start by saying we are going to keep holding, because it is very clear that our parliaments and the opposition have not been holding the government to account. We are now saying the conversation has changed. This is economic revolution time, and it is a total change to the way we've been doing things. Any other question? Yes. Oh. Yes, oh sorry, there's somebody at the back. Yes, my dear. Thank you. Beverly was your name, yes? Is how do we keep this alive because of threats? I think, personally, there's nothing I have not seen. I've been raided in my house, raided in my office, been raided on the streets. We have seen this intimidation, and I want you to understand that the president, even Davis is here, he was in my school, St. Mary's, and I'm prepared to stand here and even criticize his regime because it's not personal. These things take a Jimmy to do. Outsiders may be afraid. I've been an insider. It takes a Jimmy to do. And I'm doing it for Wanjiko. Because there's nothing better, there's nothing more fulfilling than doing for others, not yourself, not making yourself the focus. So I have removed myself from being the focus. This is not about me. It's not about me. I earlier answered the question of bitterness. I said I commissioned this audit long before they blocked me or are trying to block me. And I want to assure you, I'm not a bitter person. You know, people think others are, I'm not a bitter person. Why would I be bitter? You know, there was a time when the law could restrict people. During the time of multipartyism, you only had one party. And one party, once it said its candidate, that was it. Now the laws have allowed not only multipartyism, but our constitution is so clear about the length and breadth of participation in an election that we are not fighting against the law. We are fighting people who are trying to operate outside of the law. I'm not bitter. This is part of the process of greater democratization. And we are going to push these barriers. We are not bitter. We are, in fact, very excited of the challenges. Have I answered your question? Thank you, Beverly.
Ya, asante sana kwa wakati wako. Huyu amekuwa ni Jimmy Wanjigi. Nashukuru kwa kuchagua Wasource TV. Jimmy Wanjigi akizungumza hapo, ameweza kuzungumza mambo mengi ambayo umeweza kuyasikia kwenye hiyo video, na kuomba uweze kusubscribe kwenye Wasource TV, finya notification bell, ndio wakati wote tutapata habari kama hii unakuwa mtu wa kwanza kuipata. Hadi wakati mwingine, na kutakia usiku mwema. Asante sana.